Hello and welcome to the Final Straight F1 podcast. Again with me, Ben and Donda.
And today we're looking at the story of the Miami Grand Prix.
So Donda, I feel like the news already started to circle around that Mr. Adrian Newey, a certain chief technical, officer, designer of the Red Bull Racing, of the so dominant, well-oiled machine, that he's gonna leave Red Bull. And this news triggered like drama of the Miami Grand Prix even before it got really under the way. So what did you think of the news? How did you take that?
I mean, I think it got a little overshadowed by what happened during the race and by who won the race. We'll get to that in a bit as well. But it's definitely a big bombshell in the world of Formula One because Adrian Newey was at Red Bull for how long? 15, 20 years?
I think he joined in 2006. So, yeah so almost 18 years.
Almost 18 years, almost 20 years, during which he got a pretty significant portion of the championships, both the constructors and the drivers' champion, and he also has a few champions from before, so it's undeniable that Adrian Newey and his designing skills and his knowledge of the craft is immaculate. But now, the Red Bull Racing team is losing Adrian Newey we don't know where Adrian Newey is going, or if he's anywhere. Even going anywhere. Yeah,
exactly.
Anywhere. He might decide to retire, but I don't think Adrian Newey is retiring.
It is an interesting one because we hear all these rumors that he's, in talk. Well, obviously he is in talks with many teams. Doesn't mean he's going anywhere, but he's in talks with Ferrari. He's in talks apparently with Williams, with Aston Martin. So I heard a really funny joke that Adrian Newey's learning French so that he can say hell no to Alpine in French. But yeah.
Wait, I mean, Alpine got a point. They have 1 point in the championship
exactly.
Right now. So I wouldn't discount Alpine and their ability.
They can still win the championship mathematically, at least. But yeah, it's interesting news that broke out, right? Because we know what Adrian Newey means to Red Bull. Or at least we think we know, and we're really gonna get the true taste of, Red Bull post Adrian Newey era, because they never really had to be without him. Maybe in the Jaguar days, but it was Jaguar, not Red Bull. Red Bull was only running for what was it, like maybe a season or two or around that before Adrian Newey even joined in, and that begs the question, right? Is Red Bull gonna be in trouble in 2026 onwards without Adrian Newey?
Well, I mean, you could say that they're in trouble now already. I mean, look at it. Adrian Newey left last week, and look what happens. Like, Red Bull is in shambles already. Adrian Newey sucked the energy out of the team. He brought all the racecraft with him in a briefcase. So, yeah, Verstappen is not winning any more races this season. It's all gonna be Ferrari and McLaren. No, but on a serious note, of course, Adrian Newey isn't building the cars by hand, all alone, just in a garage somewhere with a hammer and whatever else, just building the car from scratch. He has a brilliant team working under him, but there is no doubt that he had a lot of input and a lot of impact on the success of the Red Bull team.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, one might ask, did Newey build such a well-oiled team in terms of the technical side or design side that they do not need him anymore? That without him, it's gonna be a big challenge in terms of just looking at the directions for 2026, right? Because the budget cap. Newey was so good that he was drawing on the board is gonna be for sure the most missed pencil case in the paddock. So he could draw out these car concepts, right? But nowadays, it is so much more reliant on the wind tunnel. But with a budget cap, we've heard it from Mercedes, and we see it in Mercedes. You cannot assess really 2 different or 3 different concepts. You need to really like stick with one and just dive in further and risk that you're going to get it wrong. But Red Bull has been so good with this, mainly in this ground effect era, right? So it really poses the question, is it going to be Mercedes all over again? Because we've seen the same thing in Mercedes. Everybody, saw the W11, which was the 2020 Mercedes, the fastest car in the history of F1. And it was built, or the main designer, the chief in operation was James Allison. And he was in charge of these cars, I think, since 2017 in Mercedes. So arguably, Mercedes had success prior to that. But I think aerodynamically, it was by far the best car in 2020 and 21. And at the end of 2021, James Allison, let's say he did not leave, but he switched his position to being more passive. Yep. And it was Mike Elliott who took over his, chief technical designer role. And we know how that turned out. Everybody was like, okay, it's not one man machine. It's, the team is good. James Allison, they were really not praising him for what he was, I think, back then. And they got it wrong. And they're collecting the pieces to this day. They're not moving really forward in terms of looking at the competition. So could we see the same at Red Bull?
It's a really good question. I mean, we don't know who's going to take Adrian Newey's place yet. We know that there are capable people in Red Bull. Some of them left, some. But it's also a testament to really how much the Christian Horner situation has affected the team and its inner working, and especially the cohesion. And because we don't know all the details, but if there wasn't turmoil in the team and tension, then I don't think that Adrian Newey would be looking for a way out at the start of a season, and I think he would just write it out and maybe leave once his contract was over. But it really shows that whatever is going on among the Red Bull leadership isn't a simple thing to deal with, and Adrian Newey has just had enough. But I think only time will tell whether his successors are capable of building as fast of a car as he is. But I think the maybe a little more interesting question is, what can Adrian Newey do in another team if he comes to a team that he's not used to maybe working slightly differently? Maybe a team that's struggling right now. Maybe a team with James Vowles at the helm. But I do not think that Adrian Newey is going to Williams, although it would be a very, very interesting story to see followed out. But yeah, it's just going to be really, really cool to see how Adrian Newey, if he decides to go to another team, how he integrates and whether he really is as good as everyone says and can bring the results. Because I think that rumor has it that he's not considering Mercedes because he thinks that they're too far gone, so to speak, and he doesn't have the time to save them, or it would take too long. So we'll see. I mean, of course, I would love to see him at Ferrari. But
who wouldn't? Apart from Red Bull and the other teams, but I mean, looking at that, like, he's 65, right? He's had so many championships. He's gone through Williams. He's been in McLaren. He's been in Red Bull, right? So I like, personally, I think there's only the right answer is that if he was to go to an like F1 team, it has to be Ferrari. Like,
yeah.
It's like, I don't care like what you say, how much Aston Martin is giving him. It doesn't matter. Like, for him, he's made all the money in the world he's ever gonna need, right? And like, the only thing that probably is interesting to him, and Aston Martin is working with Alonso. On the other hand, you have the same token in Ferrari. You have Hamilton, right? You have Hamilton, you have Vasseur, you have the brand of Ferrari. He never worked with Ferrari, and as we know, he always said he regrets. His only regrets is that he really wanted to work with Hamilton, Alonso, and Ferrari. And don't forget, Red Bull actually, he kind of worked with Aston Martin as well. Because he actually, Red Bull had a title sponsor. They had Aston Martin, right? I think it was 2018, maybe even 2019. Yeah. But they had this title sponsor, and I believe that Newey also worked on the road car, or on the supercar, the Aston Martin Valkyrie, right? It's like a track car. It's like a hybrid. It's like, it's something that he's working on right now with the RB17 in Red Bull. So, he's done it all. He's done it all, and the only thing that would just put the sweet, cherry on the top to his career would be to win championships with Hamilton and Ferrari, or with Leclerc and Ferrari. And that, that would be insane. Like, of course, everybody is like super excited about it, but we should not forget, Newey is beatable.
Yeah.
He is beatable, but he is an asset for sure. Like, you're not going to go slower because Newey is in your team. That's for sure.
But that would be really funny. Maybe this is all just a plot, to get Newey into another team, and he will just sabotage them from the inside and feed them false information. Like, yeah, you should definitely add more inlets or whatever. And Ferrari has a new title sponsor to get the money from, which also brings, unfortunately, very ugly race suits and potentially a very ugly car, which is awful because the SF24 has been one of the best looking cars on the grid with the white and yellow accents and everything. And just putting a giant blue circle on the engine cover and putting it on the race suit for 3 times. Okay, I get it. I get that they're getting a lot of money from them, which is good. They can afford Adrian Newey potentially, but still, and don't even let me get started on the freaking Miami livery for Ferrari. They were teasing a blue car for like a week and a half, and I mean, of course, we shouldn't have expected anything more than what they had. But, keeping the Monza 2022 in mind with the yellow suits and a dash of yellow on the car. But, yeah, what could have been with all blue or white and blue Ferrari?
Could have been really nice. To be honest, I kind of liked the race suits. I didn't really... I thought they were okay. I liked them, but I really didn't like the livery of the car. Like, the HP logo was everywhere. That is the funny thing. And, HP, the Hewlett-Packard, they were a sponsor of Mercedes previously. And could this be a thing of, if Hamilton is moving teams, that this sponsor is deciding to move where Hamilton will be? Could be. Is it one of the things that pays for Hamilton's salary? Could be. But it didn't make the car prettier, it's
no, but I don't even mean the Miami race suits were fine, but the mock-ups of the red race suits with the blue HP logo on the chest.
Yeah. That I agree with.
At the bottom of the zipper just doesn't look very good. But talking of special liveries, the VCARB team, as they want to be referred to, had a much better special livery without a lot of teasing.
Everyone liked that.
Yes. And they had a very good weekend as well.
Exactly.
We saw Daniel Ricciardo qualifying 4th for the sprint race and then finishing 4th as well.
That was the most impressive.
Yuki Tsunoda finishing in points during both races, which gave VCARB a lot of points this weekend. And they actually had one of the better paces from what I saw. They were, I think, 5th in terms of pace during the race, actually. Which
it was incredible.
You know.
Like sprint, like overall the weekend. Wow, we were blessed. We were blessed. You know, we didn't. I think part of it is that the expectation of the Miami Grand Prix is not. We know it's hot. It's not a high deg circuit, meaning you don't have many pit stops. You usually have one pit stop. But geez, it delivered, and it was a sprint weekend once again, 2 in a row. And I feel like this format, with the Parc Fermé being unlocked, after the sprint, I feel like that is a great step, because you no longer have this expectation of knowing, okay, so I know what happened in sprint quali and in a sprint, so probably 90% of the things is going to happen the same in the race and the real qualifying, like for the main race. So I feel like we've gotten a lot more surprises, and it started with Daniel Ricciardo. Wow. I was so impressed. My thinking was, okay, great. Wow, P4, incredible, right? He was on the tail of Perez, which shouldn't happen in a Red Bull. But yeah, I mean, then that he actually stayed in that position. He actually went in third place. I believe he overtook Perez for a while, right? Perez sent it down the inside right after, but you never expected Perez to be, soft on Ricciardo when he knows he's his contender for the seat. But wow, he held off Sainz in a much faster Ferrari for the entirety of the race. And the VCARB is not the fastest one in the straight line, as we know. And it was incredible to watch, like his defense. Ricciardo was back. That's exactly, the Ricciardo I remember. Unfortunately, though, it didn't last that long, and his qualifying was pretty poor. And, his race suffered. And on the other hand, Yuki performed incredibly well. Incredibly. Like the race, he scored major points. In sprints, both the VCARBs actually scored, right? Yuki was promoted to 8th after Hamilton's penalty. But yeah, double points in the sprint for VCARB is pretty incredible. And I believe they had some upgrades this weekend. Yeah. So it seems like they're going in the right direction. It's pretty good.
We kind of expected this before the start of the season, right? With the preseason testing showing promising results for both of the drivers, and with a lot of hype surrounding Daniel Ricciardo and his potential return to Red Bull. And then we've had, the few races with Ricciardo struggling with the broken chassis, and people started calling him washed, but really every single week the old saying of "you're only as good as your last race" shows true, because now people are praising Ricciardo again, but rightfully so. He did very well, but it's just, so far it's really hard to ascertain his true pace, because he has a good weekend, he has a bad weekend, he has a broken chassis, he gets upgraded, so we just have to wait to see over how he performs over the course of the season. But Yuki Tsunoda has definitely been doing great so far. He's been the best of the rest, so to speak, a number of times, with snatching points in 10th or 9th or 8th, or even better. So I think the future of VCARB is looking pretty bright, at least so far, unless some other teams bring significant upgrades, like Kick Sauber or Williams. Because Haas is doing pretty well as well. Yeah, Alpine. Alpine, again, Ocon got a point. But, yeah.
Well, VCARB is actually, I believe, 5th in the Constructors' Championship, which for an AlphaTauri / Toro Rosso / VCARB, it's unheard of. I don't think they ever finished as high. And of course, it's early into the season. Well, I say early. We're a quarter of the way in. But it's interesting because I think it just... Many teams just put the spotlight on the fact that they're owned by, one entity or one team. So it's technically a Red Bull, but it's like a baby down Red Bull. So it then begs the question of, are they sharing more things than they're allowed to? Because I don't know if you knew, But until, I don't know, it was like until 2010, 11, sometime then, Adrian Newey was actually designing the car of both Red Bull and Toro Rosso.
Really?
Yeah, because back then it was allowed. You could back then have one car designer for two teams. Or it wasn't really, you usually didn't have one owner of two teams. So I don't think they ever really thought about it. But then, when the Red Bull started being very quick, Red Bull, it was pretty, I think it needed some rule changing. So since the 2010s, you were not allowed to do that. And Adrian Newey only had to focus on the Red Bull. So, and many teams have already spoken out. Mainly, I think it was Zach Brown who said, well, is it okay if you have like two teams owned by, let's say, the same like people or the same organization? And I think it begs the question, really. So it's, you see the resemblance of the concept of the VCARB in last year's Red Bull. I mean, it's clear. And let's not forget, it's what a lot of teams are going for. So it's not completely something that's like not happening in the other teams. But I think in the VCARB, they have the same engine, right? They have the Honda Red Bull powertrains or whatever it's called. They have the same gearbox and whatever is allowed. So I think might be the suspension as well, which we know that in this era, it's a crucial part to get right. So it's interesting. I mean, it's good for Red Bull because then if you get a competitive car with some of the competitive drivers, you then have a much better idea of whether or not they're ready for a Red Bull seat or not. If they're driving at the back, like Russell was in Williams with Kubica or Latifi, you never really had an idea of what he could really do when he was given the chance.
Yep.
Right? We got to see it in Russell in 2020. What was it, like the short Bahrain Circuit Grand Prix where he replaced Hamilton for one race?
Oh yeah.
We got to see like what he's able to do, but that like with arguably without that race, we might not have seen Russell in the seat today. Who knows?
And
so it's very important.
Yeah. And it wasn't a very good race for him. Do you remember? He had like
Pace-wise,
3 pit stops,
was great,
a puncture.
But yeah, in terms of his fortune, it was one to cry about.
Yeah, but you mentioned that we maybe wouldn't have seen him in Mercedes, but we all definitely, or most likely, wouldn't have seen Sergio Perez in the Red Bull because he won.
Yeah,
that Grand Prix, right?
He did.
And showed his potential or showed his strength, and then Red Bull decided to go with him for the 2021.
And it seems like they're going with him again as the favorite, right?
Yeah, I mean, as long as he delivers. I mean, I don't think they're in a rush to replace him, unless, and even compared to last year when he struggled to get out of Q3.
Oh yeah.
For I don't know how it happens pretty often, and even back then people are debating on whether or not he will be replaced. So, and he's doing way better now. So I don't think that's happening anytime soon. But we'll see. As always, you're only ever as good as your last race. But yeah, it's AlphaTauri with or Toro Rosso or Racing Bulls now have been struggling, right, for the past few years. But actually, if you remember in 2021, it was when it was still Gasly and Tsunoda, they were doing very well. Gasly was consistently like 6th. Sometimes he was 4th. He was very often in the top 7. Yuki even got a P4 in Abu Dhabi, which of course nobody remembers.
Yeah.
But it was his best. It was his best finish. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how they prove over the course of this year.
And Gasly won the race for AlphaTauri in 2020.
That is true.
In Monza, right? I mean, it was chaos, but still, like, it just went to show that when the opportunity was there, it was delivered, right? And I don't know if the same can be said about Mr. Kevin Magnussen, because he had this opportunity to, give Hülkenberg a lot of space when he was in the sprint, right? they were behind each other. I think that Hülkenberg qualified in front of Magnussen, and then Hamilton was behind. He started 12th. We had all this turn 1, which we're going to get to later. Both turn 1s were pretty fun, turns out, even in the main race. But yeah, Magnussen, he had this choice to make, right? Either being a sportsman and, like, I'm not saying to allow Hamilton to pass, but to concede the position when it's pretty clear that the overtake was made. And I don't know what about you, but did Magnussen go too far in his defense against Hamilton?
Well, Magnussen has been racking up penalty points and, doing what some may consider dirty driving or cheating. And, it almost feels like it's a part of the Haas strategy now. They have a book of the forbidden moves in every race. Magnussen just picks out one. Like when where was it, Jeddah, where he just... I mean, that wasn't... I don't think a lot of people called it cheating or anything, but he held up everybody behind Hülkenberg. He's been very supportive, but I mean, I think he has to tone it down at least a little bit, because otherwise we're gonna see him get banned before the end of the season, and that's just...
Yeah, it's about maybe how many times will we see him banned before the end of the season with this rate, because he is on 10 penalty points out of the 12 allowed, right? And he has stacked up most of his points for the past few races. So, and I think you mentioned really great example, Jeddah. We talked about it as well, right? We said, well, that people called it cheating, people were upset, and we said that, well, we don't think it was cheating because it was not maybe... Let's say the general idea of racing is you want to get to the checkered flag the fastest race time as possible. So technically it was against that, but he didn't break any rules except for maybe when he cut the corner and deliberately didn't let anyone by. That was a little bit over the line. But I think in here, it's a much different story. You can back down whoever you want because the argument is overtake me. But then Hamilton overtook him, and he always went back. I think he even like crashed into him. He just like bumped his wheels, against him. So he forced him off the track. Yeah, that was a tad too much. And I feel like that as many, I think it was Andrea Stella who said it. He was, the penalty points shouldn't just be cumulative. They should be more exponential, right? Yeah. Like he said that if you rack up, 6 or 8 points over one weekend, you should probably sit one out home and cool down. Which I see the point. But yeah, it is definitely an arguable one, in my opinion. Like, of course, Hülkenberg wouldn't be able to get the points he got if it wasn't for Magnussen. But I don't think that this is a great advertising for racing, because what are you then supposed to think? Like, you cannot like look at the TV, let's say a new fan comes and he just sees Magnussen bumping Hamilton off, and you're like, oh, this is allowed, and the more experienced fan says, no, it's not. So he's like, well, why is he doing it? And so it's, for entertainment, I think K-Mag deserves a plaque, for entertaining all the people, but I don't know. I just don't think this should be the way he does that. So I think he went overboard, and I think the penalties were more than deserved. He knows it. Everyone knows it. And does that beg the question again? Should there be any rules that forbid this kind of racing? And could this even be controlled somehow?
I mean, if he continues with what he's doing, he's probably going to face the consequences of having those 12 penalty points. But I mean, it's also interesting in terms of his future, right? Because Hülkenberg has been just confirmed by going to Kick Sauber.
Right, that got completely overshadowed by Adrian Newey leaving. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
And in a way, I think it gives Magnussen a bit of job security, because obviously Hülkenberg is, the one getting the points in the Haas right now, but I don't think they can afford to take on two new drivers at the same time. So they're probably gonna keep K-Mag around and then hope to use his wisdom and his book of forbidden moves to teach his successors.
Yeah, and one of the successor could be Ollie Behrman, which are the rumors, to go to Haas. So,
who, by the way,
moves.
It's his birthday today, so happy birthday, Ollie Behrman.
Yeah, happy birthday, Ollie. If you're definitely watching this podcast, so we're wishing happy birthday to our number one loyal fan.
Yes, and enjoy the book of forbidden moves that you're getting in the mail from Kevin Magnussen today.
Subscribed.
And you mentioned Zach Brown and Andrea Stella before. So I think it's time to address Lando NoWins becoming Lando wins this weekend with a really impressive drive that was rewarded by both, the win, his maiden win, a Driver of the Day award, and just it was amazing to watch. What did you think of Lando Norris?
It was incredible, honestly. Like when I was watching the race, of course, turn one, whatever happened. We'll get to that as well. But when the race was just, evolving, it was interesting because Verstappen did not just disappear by 30 seconds. He was actually, Oscar Piastri was second. So
yeah.
He was only about 3 seconds ahead of Piastri. And suddenly we saw Norris in, P4, P5, setting the fastest laps. And I was thinking, oh, that's a shame that Norris is not, because Norris, just bear in mind, Norris had more upgrades on the car than Piastri once again. I think that's also one thing that should be noticed in Piastri's performance. It needs to be accounted for. So I was thinking, wow, he's 8 seconds behind Verstappen. So I was thinking, wow, could he actually catch up and overtake and overcut perhaps? Because my head was, okay, is he going to stay on the mediums and is he going to overcut Verstappen a little bit? Well, when Verstappen pitted, he was on the hards and he was not faster than Lando Norris. So I was like, wow, game on. When the safety car came, man, that was the moment I was like, it's in the bag. It's gonna happen. We also had the incident of Max Verstappen hitting the bollard, and actually he destroyed a chunk of his floor towards the rear end of the car. We don't know how much that cost him, but I feel like even if he had his whole floor, he wouldn't do anything against Norris because Norris just pulled away. He created a 7-second gap. It was insane. Every lap felt like 10 laps in terms of the length, when watching Norris was like, please don't bin it. Everybody remembers, 2021, Russia. And because we have seen Lando crumbling under the pressure or not delivering in the most crucial moments, mainly, let's say, some qualifying laps. But wow, I have to say he delivered, he sealed it, and he sent it, and it was amazing. And it felt so refreshing seeing a new race winner. And in the name of Lando and McLaren finally as well. I was super happy. What did you think?
It was amazing to watch. It was once the safety car came because of Magnussen, again, we've just talked about this, and his contact with Sargent, but
he can't get a break.
It was pretty clear. But I think given how close the race pace was between the top three teams, I think almost any of the drivers could have gotten a win on Sunday, just based on when they pitted, or when they, or based on the safety car. But definitely not the only thing, that I don't think that takes away from Lando's win at all, because he did deliver and he did drive like crazy to pull away from Verstappen, even with his damaged floor, he drove the race of his life so far. And I feel like his vindication through having his first win after more than 100 races is very well deserved. But it was very interesting to watch with, Sainz and Piastri battling in the back as well, with Sainz getting a little heated over Piastri, threatening him on the radio and
saying, that was funny.
Well, if tell him that if he gives it back to the position back, he will get no penalty. I think he should have take the pressure off, like let off the steam a little bit, let off the gas a bit, because I don't think that Sainz was in the right. I think that the penalty was deserved, and it did kind of ruin Piastri's race, who was also having really good pace before then. But yeah, as you said, even the turn one, was, as soon as I saw Leclerc just standing there, not moving, I was like, well, it's over. I can stop watching. But then Perez decided to almost take out his teammate, which would have been, nobody wants to see teammates crashing.
That would be Ricciardo in Red Bull seat, confirmed.
But it would have been very interesting to see how the race would pan out after that. And it would be also very interesting to see how they would deal with that. Because Perez just came out like a madman, but that kind of ensured that Leclerc stayed in the race. Sainz moved up as well. So yeah. But it was a very interesting result. But also, McLaren were in an interesting spot, also with Donald Trump being in their garage during the weekend, and then tweeting out or posting on Truth Social or whatever that he brought luck to Lando Norris and brought them the win. So that was
make McLaren great again.
Yeah, it was a little controversial, because
they released a statement, right? That it was like, it was not really like a political move from them. They had to make it clear, but it was super odd. They was not a fan of that. I mean, whoever you vote for, I don't really care, but it's just, having a political persona such as Trump in your garage, it's a statement of your own, but still, like, of course, you're not going to say screw off, but it was an interesting one. So,
yeah, I mean, especially with Zach Brown being one of the supporters of the FIA's move to ban quote-unquote politics in F1,
right? Yeah,
somewhat targeted at Hamilton and his activities, and then you invite the presidential candidate of a pretty, heated election that's coming up this year to your garage, and I don't know, it's just a bit strange. I understand that the drivers, they don't really get to choose who they talk to and whose hands they shake because they have their PR training, but it's just very strange overall.
It's not an easy choice, but at least their on-track performance with these upgrades has been pretty incredible. And one begs the question, right? Like, well, we knew China wasn't really their strong track, like if you look at their DNA, right? But it was a lot better than expected. And coming to Miami, where it, like, if we look at the specs of the McLaren, it should have been a all-right track. They've come in and they have been the fastest race car, which, should that have us excited for the next race? Or is, many people say the title fight is on, but I think we also need to be very careful with our expectations because it has been the first time in probably like 20 races that Verstappen has actually been beaten on track.
Yeah.
Which, as scary as it is, it is very likely that the next race could be won by Verstappen by 30 seconds. But it is for sure promising to see, McLaren getting so much closer and overtaking Red Bull in that aspect, at least in one race. Because guess what next race brings us? It is Imola. And we have been promised a significant upgrade to the Ferrari, to SF24, and they have a filming day, I believe, in this weekend or sometime in the Maranello. And it should be, or Fiorano, I'm not sure.
Yep, Fiorano.
So they're getting their upgrades ready. And it seems like it's going to be a major one. People call it SF24 Evo.
24 or 2.0 as well. Right?
Yeah, 2.0 and an Evo. So are we actually getting from now on a three-way fight for the win?
I mean, it would be amazing to see. And this has been a very strange season in terms of knowing whether it's going to be competitive or not, because we saw pre-season testing and we were like, okay, it looks like some people are getting close, but at the same time, maybe Red Bull is sandbagging. And then we got the first couple of races where we saw Verstappen, win by his usual 20, 30 seconds or, less or more, but he has been very dominant. Then we had Australia where the reliability issues caused him to lose. But then dominance again. But now McLaren with their upgrades and now Ferrari potentially with their upgrades. It's looks really promising. Again, we don't want to get overhyped and we need to manage our expectations, but I really would like to see a three-way battle for the Constructors' Championship, because as of now, they're not that far apart.
True. Mainly Ferrari is fairly close to Red Bull. Verstappen is, 30 points in the lead, and that's to Perez. And let's be real, Perez is likely not going to challenge Verstappen for the championship if something terrible goes wrong. But we know that Lando could be capable of challenging Verstappen. We know that Leclerc and Sainz could be, challenging. So, and let's not forget Piastri. Of course, we know that he's been behind Lando, and that's mainly in race pace because he was having a lot of trouble with managing the tires. But we've seen here in Miami where tire management is not such a huge thing because it's a low degradation circuit. So your tires don't fall off, so it's not an abrasive, tarmac. But, arguably, in my opinion, I feel like Piastri might have had a better performance of a weekend in terms of performance. Not the result. And maybe, as you say, your last race is the one that you remember. You're determined by your last race. He was determined by his last part of the race, because until then he was doing a brilliant job. He outqualified Norris in the sprint qualifying. He beat him in the sprint because obviously Norris was taken out by, well, it's difficult to say, Stroll, Alonso, Hamilton combo. Probably more of the Stroll, Alonso, sandwichy kind of thing. But he has been doing a great job even in the race. He overtook Sainz, he overtook Leclerc, and he was P2. And he stayed P2 and until things got heated with Sainz, which, it's difficult. But in the end, Sainz got the penalty for his move, which I thought was quite interesting. I was expecting it to go the other way, to be honest. Because because I thought that Piastri kind of pushed Sainz off. But I guess when you look at it from the angle of Sainz, he had nowhere to go, right? So it's a difficult one. But Piastri had a great weekend. It was such a shame that it got overshadowed by the results. So do you think that Piastri might have had a better weekend in terms of performance than Norris?
I mean, I feel like that's a very controversial thing to say right now, but it's a good question. I'm I'm not sure, honestly. Well, but he did drive very well, and McLaren has a very good lineup for this year and years to come, probably. With Piastri has been very good in qualifying. He has been struggling a bit more in terms of race pace in comparison to Norris, but he's been getting better as well. And I'm very curious to see how the season progresses with them, because I think Piastri has a lot of potential still and if McLaren continues on their trajectory, I don't think it would be a surprise to see Piastri win a race.
100%. Let's not forget that Piastri didn't have all the upgrades of the McLaren as Norris did. So hence why I'm asking this question, right? Because we have to bear in mind that he didn't have all the upgrades. So the question was, if he got them, like how much more could have there been for Piastri? But yeah, of course, like if you have to choose the better driver weekend, whatever you consider, right? You would have to choose Norris, right? Because he delivered when it counted, which is the most important thing. And he got the win. He got his first win. And, that has to be a 10 out of 10 performance, like no matter what, like almost. If you get your first win, I think he managed it so well as well. He made no mistakes in the race. I feel like he made 0 mistakes in the race. Yeah. He got compromised by lap 1, which, as you say, Perez was very close to ending his career. And I loved the reaction of Verstappen seeing the footage.
Yeah, in the cool-down room.
He was like, oh yeah, that could have been really great. It also compromised Lando and Sainz, I believe. So, yeah, I was surprised there was no penalty at all. I mean, it's controversial because he did not crash into anyone per se, but he did limit a lot of drivers. So
I think turn 1, I don't think that would have been a penalty in any way unless he touched anyone. But yeah, it's definitely not a nice thing to do on the first lap. But Perez could be. Let's not discount Perez. He's been, usually the start of the season is stronger for him. He talks about trying for the championship, and maybe this year it's the other way around. Maybe we're gonna see a rise of Perez, and maybe he's gonna be the one challenging for the title. But
still, he rises.
Only time will tell. So he rises. But
yeah,
could it be time to address our predictions for the Miami Grand Prix? Because I don't know about you, but my prediction of Logan Sargent having a great weekend and doing better than Alex Albon. Well, he did out-qualify Alex Albon in sprint qualifying after Albon's time got deleted. But overall, I can't really say that Sargent's weekend has been particularly good, especially after being taken out by Magnussen in the main race. So no.
You get the point for this one. Like, bravo, because this is the first time that Sargent has beaten Albon in a let's say a session that counts.
Take it. I'll take it.
I mean, he was looking pretty good, to be honest. He in the sprint qualifying, Albon was like, when you were looking at the pace, Sargent had a solid lap apart from that first sector. The first sector was bad. He had the lap, I think he set the final sector purple. So, what could have been? What could have been? But yeah, I mean, he out-qualified him. Let's not forget that Albon, he invalidated his lap, but nonetheless, it's in the history books. He was in front of Alexander Albon. So, yeah, and then he had a pretty shocking weekend in terms of the race, because he got taken out by Magnussen, who had a shocking weekend himself. And I think that, it was quite incredible to see how many things can go wrong for one driver in one race. But yeah, interesting. So your prediction was right, unlike somebody else's, like mine. I predicted that Charles Leclerc will beat Max Verstappen at least once in any of the 4 sessions that count. So it means sprint, quali, sprint race, and the main race. Though he came close. So even in practice, he didn't beat him because he spun. So in sprint quali and the quali, he was pretty close. Yeah. Leclerc did an amazing job, like for, the weekend where it started like suboptimally. It was like the worst start to the weekend you can almost imagine. He didn't crash the car, but still, you don't get any practice. He didn't finish like 1 timed lap, even though it was a sprint weekend with only 1 practice session. So, yeah, but then he delivered. He was absolutely on fire. He was in front of Sainz. He was quicker than Sainz. His tire management was better than from Sainz. So, I'm not going to take the point here, but I'm very happy with what I saw in Charles.
But you were 1/10 away.
And what could have been if that practice session would have been under the belt of Leclerc? Maybe the 1/10 would suddenly appear. Who knows? And it is pretty sad because that could have been even more interesting. Yeah, and also I think we have to mention one team that had upgrades that we didn't really talk about yet. It's Mercedes. They had an upgraded floor, apparently. And I feel like they have had like 2-part weekend, right? First of all, their qualifying performances were shocking. It just looked like they're washed. Because if you look at the main qualifying, Hamilton actually set the fastest time in Q2. And by far, like 6/10 or something. Which is interesting, and it just shows the inconsistency of the Mercedes car, right? Like if it goes 1 degree, the track temperature goes 1 degree down or up. It's just, the car is like a diva. It just feels like it's changing all the time. But when the race came, you had George Russell, Lewis Hamilton, both on different strategies. Hamilton starting on the hard, Russell on the medium. And it was an interesting one. Well, Hamilton once again kind of cut through. He had an interesting battle with another Haas of Nico Hülkenberg. And once he finally got past him, he locked up. And he had to repass him again, which was interesting. But yeah, it was a uncharacteristic error for Hamilton again. Because he's usually like incredibly good on the brakes, right? So it again just shows it is the same as China, right? We saw the qualifying lap, and he locked up his front tires. And that was, not optimal, but Hamilton had a really, really good race. I feel like he was pace-wise. He was catching the Red Bull of Sergio Perez.
He was. I think it really went to show that Lewis Hamilton is not checked out of F1. He's not just there.
He's not
biding his time. Yeah, he's not washed. He's not biding his time until he goes to Ferrari to collect a paycheck. He still wants to race. He was locked in, so to speak. He wanted to, he was on it. He was driving very well. So, who knows? Once, maybe if Mercedes get their car in order, or at the very least, maybe next year, I'm curious to see what Lewis Hamilton in a capable car is capable of.
Yeah, me too, because one might ask, what could happen if the safety car came in 2 laps earlier? Because you had Hamilton on the contra strategy, on the opposite strategy, right? And we saw that the medium tires hold up so well, and they're quite a bit quicker than the hard tires. And if only the safety car came in before Hamilton pitted, he would have emerged in front of Perez, unless he didn't pit, then he probably wouldn't. Or I think he still would, I'm not sure. But he would likely emerge ahead of Perez and maybe a few cars. But yeah, it would have been such a different story, because then it's much harder, or it's much easier to overtake, cars on a little used hard tires than a Red Bull on medium tires that are brand new. And I feel like generally the, let's say, Ferrari car would be easier to overtake than the Red Bull car. So one might wonder, could Hamilton have won the race? Because you were hearing him just screaming, you do you have any more power? Give it to me. If you have it, give it to me. And he was close to overtaking Perez, but the top speed of Mercedes was so bad in the weekend. And you could see it in the sprint. You could see it in Russell. He didn't make any ground.
Well, let's move on to the driver of the weekend section of our podcast. And honestly, I don't know. We might just have to agree on one driver this weekend, because I think
100%.
It just might be a sin not to go for Lando Norris for the 2024 Miami Grand Prix.
I mean, you have to go for this guy because he has done nothing wrong in the race, and we all know the race matters the most. There is the most points. He got his maiden F1 win. He didn't get it gifted. He had to earn it. He had to, pull out the gap to Verstappen in a pretty strong RB20 Red Bull. And he didn't put the foot wrong in the race, so it's a well-deserved performance, and that's why he's our final straight F1 driver of the weekend.
Gets our seal of approval. But now, on to the predictions of the Imola Grand Prix, or the Emilia Romagna.
Yeah, whatever it is called, in Imola.
Yeah, in Imola.
Well,
so
I would like to make a prediction that there will be not a completely new, but there will be a new 2024 Grand Prix winner. Someone who hasn't won this season yet. So it cannot be Sainz, it cannot be Verstappen, and it cannot be Norris. I feel it in my bones. Ferrari will be quick. That is what I feel in Imola. It's typically it should be a good track for them. And because you have a lot of fast, direction changing sections. I feel like, Leclerc is going to have a very good time in that Ferrari. And I feel like also Oscar Piastri is going to have a pretty solid weekend, because he's getting all the upgrades, I believe. So should be good. And maybe even Sergio Perez, because remember, I think that he even outqualified him, Verstappen, in a few years back at Imola. It's one of the few tracks he could actually outqualify him at. So I think we have a lot to look forward to. What about your prediction, Tonda?
Well, it's on a similar note, because I'm going to go as far as predicting a double podium for Ferrari in Imola. I am very optimistic about the upgrade.
You are.
But I don't, not even just on, maybe if not on pure pace, I don't think they're going to be the new Red Bull with the winning by 20 seconds. But with I think everything will fall into place for the Italian team to get a double podium in Imola. Unless the upgrades are a total failure, but let's not say that. So I am predicting a double podium for Ferrari.
Sounds great. Well, we'll find out in roughly 2 weeks' time, where we'll get everything tested and we will see who really stands on that podium and if we get the new winner this season. Stay tuned to our podcast and see you after Imola. Take care, guys.